David Pakman from the David Pakman Show reported on a minimum wage study that I want to share with everybody. Listen to this.
Fortunately for us, that's exactly what the Center for Economic and Policy Research did. They analyzed a report by the White House Council of Economic Advisors on the effects of raising the minimum wage beyond the federal minimum. Okay, so they say, okay, here is where we are based on the federal minimum wage of $7.25. Let's see what impact on employment and the economy going beyond that federal minimum has. The researchers found that the 18 states plus Washington, D.C. that increased wages beyond the federal minimum wage in 2014, number one, it led to low-income workers benefiting. That obviously makes sense. But it also saw no depression of jobs available to low-income workers. There was no additional economic harm found to those increases above and beyond the federal minimum wage. This actually increased average wages in low-wage jobs, but it also reversed a trend generally of falling real wages that we saw. And we did not see a negative impact on jobs. The CEA, for those who say, hey, it's a White House council, the CEA doesn't have its own data. They use Bureau of Labor Statistics data.
So, in 18 states where they looked into it, where they had increased the minimum wage above the federal minimum wage, there are no downsides. No downsides, and it helps workers. Now, one of the arguments always made by right-wingers is, hey, you're going to increase unemployment. Well, that's not true in the places where they studied it. Now, theoretically, I could see how it would be true if you raised it too much. So if you wake up tomorrow and say, now the minimum wage is $50, well, then yeah, small businesses probably can't afford to pay their minimum wage workers $50, and they'll either have to fire them or go out of business. So theoretically, you could see how it's true if you raise it too much. But when you talk about doing marginal increases and you talk about raising it just to a living wage, well, the data shows that it's not the case that it leads to mass unemployment. And furthermore, even in, like, let's say in some cases, so let's say in Wyoming, $15 an hour is too steep, and it does lead to an increase in unemployment. The idea that the increase in unemployment is like the sole economic indicator that's the end-all be-all, and that's like the debate-ending argument. That's a really shitty argument because you could theoretically have zero unemployment. Now, everybody goes, well, that's awesome, right? Zero unemployment. I mean, that's a really healthy economy, isn't it? I mean, if we talk about the unemployment rate as this great economic indicator as to the health of the country and everybody in it, well, then 0% unemployment, you're at an ideal situation. So how do you achieve that? How do you achieve zero unemployment? Slavery. Zero unemployment, slavery. So perhaps the unemployment rate in and of itself is not the best economic indicator when talking about these issues. That's not to say it counts for nothing, but it certainly isn't the most important indicator. It's maybe not even in one of the top 3 or 4 or 5 indicators. So, but either way, if you raise it to a ridiculous number, sure, it'll lead to unemployment. But if you raise it marginally or you just try to make it a living wage, you're not going to have these giant issues with it, and it's still something that's right to do for the people. So there are other facts I want to bring up here. We've discussed them on the show before, but every time we discuss the minimum wage, it should be brought up. If you simply made the minimum wage what it was equal to in 1968, so in other words, the exact same amount it's worth, but obviously you are increasing with inflation. But if you made it equal to what it was in 1968, the minimum wage would be over $10 an hour today. So think about that. It's $7.25, which means the minimum wage today is worth less than what it was worth in the late 1960s. That's artificially low. People say, oh, you don't want to make it artificially high. It's artificially low right now. If the minimum wage increased with productivity gains, it'd be over $20 an hour, about $21 an hour today. If the minimum wage increased with the earnings and the increase of the top 1%, it'd be about $22 an hour today. So there's just no argument to keep it as it is. It's a starvation wage. In the United States of America, you can work a full-time job at minimum wage and you don't make enough money to survive. You don't make enough money to live in a one-bedroom apartment in any state in the United States. So you simply can't live on the minimum wage. Well, guess what? There are going to be some people who never graduate above that level through no fault of their own. Think about it. So this is where the Republicans go, just work hard and work your way up the ladder. Whoa, hold on. Let's say we lived in their ideal world. So now we're out of the realm of objective reality and just into their fantasy world. So everybody wakes up tomorrow, everybody busts ass to get that promotion. Everybody working every minimum wage job in the country. Not everybody can get that promotion. So by definition, there will be some people who never make more than that minimum level. So then the question becomes, what do you do? As a society, do you say, hey, you work full-time and don't make enough money to live, and I'm okay with that? Do you do that? Well, if you do that, I just think you're a callous bastard. I think you're fairly immoral, and you're kind of a prick, and you don't have sympathy for people. And it's also just dumb, I think, to say, yeah, that's a system that's sustainable. Work full-time and don't make enough money to live. And don't get angry either. You're like sowing the seeds of revolt. So yes, there are going to be some people that are always at that level, no matter what happens, no matter how hard everybody works. We always need people to do those jobs. So yeah, pay them a living wage. If they work full-time, they should make enough money to survive. Not saying they should get a yacht or a mansion or 3 cars or whatever, but they should make enough money to live. So that's not a crazy thing to say, and the economic studies are backing up our position on this. We're not being unreasonable and asking for a $50 an hour minimum wage. No, we're saying make it a living wage, tie it to inflation, and then we're done with this issue forever. Living wage, tie it to inflation, done. So it naturally increases as inflation goes up. That's all you got to do, man. And if you think it's not possible, check in how Australia's doing, then come back to me.